Hello, my name's Tom Cahill. It's Friday, the 1st of November, 2019. This video is quite an important video. In a way, it's long overdue. I don't know I think I have mentioned this in other videos, but it deserves its own video. Right now, let me just explain something, right? We're going to look at a timeline here, right? And we're going to look at somebody who I don't really know much about. And I will put it to you that even if you're a fan of his or somebody who was around before he came on the scene, you know, so maybe 20 years older than me, 25 years older than me, and were grown up and paying attention, you probably think you know a lot more about him, and maybe you may well do. But the subject of this video is Elton John, right? Now, Elton John was a singer. I believe he started getting famous maybe in the early 70s, 60s, something like that. Anyway, so Elton John's a singer. Elton John was married, I believe. Well, anyway, he wasn't a gay, right, to start off with. When I say he wasn't a gay, I'm saying the public impression of him was he wasn't a gay, yeah? So then maybe people thought he was. I don't know. It's not important, but please just bear with me. So I'm not trying to have an argument with people who are Elton John experts. This is not the purpose of this. This is not the purpose of this video. Right, so Elton John, he comes out, he's a singer. He's a good singer, right? He is a good singer. There's no two ways about that. I don't know if he writes his songs or not. You see, so I'm not pretending to be an expert. I believe he does write his songs, or at least he has he's put out there as though he writes his own songs. I could be wrong. Not important. So you see, this is not the purpose of this video. So anyway, then he comes out as gay. He's the first mega famous person to come out as gay, and he's very popular as well. So he was like an openly gay, because a lot of people, everyone knew they were gay, but they never sort of said they were gay. Yeah, they kind of kept it hidden, as has been the case, you know, all throughout history. So anyway, so he comes out as gay, right? And people thought, well, you know, yeah, well, we like him. He's okay. You know, he got through the sort of, he ran the gauntlet and he got through it. Yeah, obviously with a massive amount of media manipulation, right? So you've managed to get him through, and he's still doing all right, and he's still popular. Right, the next thing is he's like the first gay to sort of start sporting his boyfriend. Yeah. Yeah, or pseudo-husband, if you like, or pseudo-wife, depending on which way. Pseudo-spouse, let's say. And I would imagine, again, I'm not sure, but he would have been one of the people who would have probably spoken in favour of civil partnerships. Now, as with Peter Tatchell, often you have to agree with Peter Tatchell, because Peter Tatchell actually says a lot of things are actually very, very, very hard to disagree with, but then he puts a nasty spin on him, because he's very clever, is Peter Tatchell. The whole point is, he said years ago, maybe 20 years ago, everybody should be allowed to have a civil partnership with anybody because it's an economic thing for nothing else. So if you live with your friend in a house and your friend dies and you've been living in the same house again for 30 years, together for 30 years or whatever, you know, you should be able to have an insurance so that you don't have to pay inheritance tax to stay living in the house that you live in with your friend, or just some guy you know, or some woman that you know. They might even be separate living spaces in the same property. You see what I mean? So obviously you can't really say that anybody can't have a civil partnership. That is clearly wrong. And the idea that that's got any bearing on anything to do with getting married and all that stuff, really it should be kept separate. Right, so that's what I think on it. Right, so then he was the first person to get married as a gay. Now, of course, I'm putting that in inverted commas because, you know, men and men can't get married. I mean, this is just an oxymoron. It can't happen. But this is a crazy world we live in, and the pro-paedophile agenda is very, very strong. Right, and so some people think that's completely wrong. Some people think that there's nothing wrong with it, and of course it's totally natural. Now these people are lost. They're down the pro-paedophile rabbit hole head first, and there's no way of pulling them out. You know. Yeah, without decapitating them, they're just going down that hole. They're completely irreversibly stuck down that hole. There's no way you're going to get any of them out. These people have completely lost, and the cognitive dissonance is so strong, it's so far, and it's a good analogy, having your head down a rabbit hole. There's just no way they're ever going to come out of that hole, you know, because they've just got so much vested in the bullshit, and the idea that actually they're pushing a pro-paedophile agenda, right, is so horrific to them. To accept that they've got it completely wrong is beyond any of them to get their heads around, because they don't want to get their heads around it, because then they'll realise how stupid they've been and how low they've fallen. You see what I mean? And they won't want that. Right, so he's the first one to get married of fame or notoriety, depending on which way you look at it. Now, again, like I say, I did a video just then about Keith Vaz. You cannot believe anything anybody says about any of these celebrities or people who are pushed in your face on the news media, because any of their marriages or anything like that, it's all purely done as a distraction. Now, they might happen to end up getting along with each other, but they're basically arranged marriages or arranged aberrations of the concept of marriage in this case. So he might be gay, he might not be gay. But the point is, he's just a compromised weirdo who'll do whatever he's told to do. It's as simple as that. Yeah? Anyway, so the story is, he's now married to this guy called David Furnish. This is the story, right? And then, of course, they decide they want to adopt children, right? So each time, this is the pro-paedophile thing. Instead of going straight forward and saying, we need to let paedophiles have access to children because it's their right to rape children, what they do is they go round the back and they say, well, why shouldn't homosexuals be allowed to be living in the same house? You know, they're homosexuals, so just let them do whatever they want and keep it behind closed doors. That's probably the most sensible way. And if they're open that they are, no problem, right? And nobody really can argue with that. I mean, I suppose people would say, well, that concept alone is so bad, because then, say, children are going to hear about this. You see, this is the point, because it's actually then promoted. That will fuck their heads up, which it will. So in a way, it is wrong, and they should have to keep it secret. But then at the same time, I still think they should have civil partnerships in a legal capacity. Even if they made it the law, they were not allowed to talk about it to anybody who's not a grown-up. The thing is, then what they did is they changed the age of consent for what they call sex, so that it's equality, right? Well, the thing is, I know gays get up to all sorts of things, and I don't really want to make this a grotesque, pornographic type, disgusting diatribe about all the sort of sick stuff perverts get up to. But you see, the thing is that the very word sex has been massively, massively manipulated over the years. If you'd have said to somebody 100 years ago, I had sex with somebody, they wouldn't have a clue what you were talking about. They probably presume that you were born in the same maternity hospital and the same doctor held you up and said, right, he's a boy. Oh, this is also a boy. That's what they would think. Like when you sex a rabbit, that's when you pick it up and you sort of look, because it's hard to tell whether it's a boy rabbit or a girl rabbit. I don't know how to do it. But that's what it would have meant. So if you said, I had sex with this guy, oh, were you born in the same hospital? That's what they would think. They've completely abused the concept of sex, so that now they can say you can have different types of sex, because the whole word sex didn't mean intercourse, and it didn't mean copulation. Do you see what I mean? And it didn't mean like making love or anything. It didn't mean any of those things. And of course, making love used to also mean kissing. So it's all been completely jumbled around, and gay definitely didn't mean sticking things up people's arseholes. Definitely not, right? So the whole thing has been completely twisted. Right, so they changed the age of consent to be sexually abused voluntarily to 16 instead of 18. And previously it had just been completely illegal. And formally it was an executable crime, which wasn't exercised, but it just gave a strong message that it was wrong. So I believe they shouldn't have been killing people for being homosexuals. But we need to do a little bit more of a quest into Jewish word theft and Jewish poison, throwing down things on the floor for food that you pick up and eat in the use of words that are not going to help you in your life. They're going to fucking confuse you and make nobody understand what they're talking about. Right, homosexual. The word actually originated in Germany, and then that's an anglicised version of the word, because homosexual in the Germanic provinces, it wasn't Germany at the time. This is pre the formation of a united Germany, right? Homosexual was a word, like a scientific word that came in because they didn't think that the previous word, which was used for homosexuals, was boy ravager, right? So the word homosexual was actually, and a lot of homosexuals will say, I don't like that word, or the anti-homosexual laws, it's even the word homosexual is really bad. These militant gays don't like the word homosexual at all, because they think it makes it not sound flowery. They want a positive bias on a perverted positive bias on their disability, their mental derangement, rather than just calling it neutral. And it should be called something neutral, I believe, because it's a medical problem. Clearly it is. So, you've got boy ravager getting replaced by homosexual, right? So, you've got these gays, and then they've changed their proclivity for bumming young boys and getting young boys, corrupting impressionable individuals. It doesn't really matter exactly what their age is, because you shouldn't be sexually abused. And if you're willingly letting someone sexually abuse you, that's still manipulation. So it is actually still rape, whatever way you look at it. Yeah. Like if you cut yourself on the arm with a knife because you're probably upset about being sexually abused. That's the main reason people do things like this. That still is self-harm. Yeah. So if, for instance, I was asking somebody else to like scratch my arm with a knife, yeah, that would actually be that person. They should say, no, I'm not going to scratch your arm with a knife, because if I scratch your arm with a knife, I'm actually committing a violation against you. I am assaulting you because you're not right in the head and I shouldn't be doing it. This is how it should work. And this is all when you start eroding the language and putting new Jewish poison words in front of people, which are spells, which confuse them, you get this concept where sex can be what they call anal sex, right? Well, if sex was to do with reproduction, and it used to be just the actual binary mode, which was either male or female. Then they started talking about the act of the two things linking together. Then they start talking about intersex. But you see, that would never have been possible if they hadn't have come up with the initial concept of taking the words which define man or woman, male or female, yeah, and making now it to be the same thing. So the whole idea of clashing two polar opposites into one thing is the whole reason they can come up with this concept of intersex. And the I obviously means would have always meant in LGBTI plus, that would have been intersex, right? That's what they say it means. And intersex, they say, is for hermaphrodite. Right now, a hermaphrodite is somebody who's born with a mixture of or lack of male or female anatomy, right? So sometimes it's hard to say which the person is, especially when they've just been born. But hermaphrodite, that's a physiological thing. It's not a physical. It's a physical thing. It's not a psychological illness. Yeah. Now, possibly it will give you a psychological illness having one of these problems. Yeah. I would imagine it probably would come with a very high likelihood of understandable problems. Yeah. And of course, you've got to decide which one you want to be. Just like the very, very rare case of androgen insensitive males, which is somebody who's born a male, but they're androgen insensitive. So when their bits and pieces develop into a male, they don't, but they're actually a male. So they've got an X and is it an X and an X chromosome or an X and a Y? I forget whichever one makes you a male. They've actually got that, but they only look like women. Right, so we're going to pull this back in. So they're then saying that these homosexuals, this David Furnish and Elton John, right, are going to get married. And then the next thing is, of course, they want children. But of course, the reason that people didn't like gays in the first place, because historically people just thought they're perverts, they're wrong, just stay away from them, keep children away from them. You don't want them corrupting with their bad ideas. And we know that they've got proclivities against children. And this is very important. We must interject here. Most homosexuals will do absolutely anything not to be left alone with children, because they know that lots of gays have these proclivities, and most of them, they might have a thought about doing all sorts of sick stuff, but of course they would be horrified by it, and they might have succumbed to doing things like sodomy and doing sex acts with with their same sex. But they don't want to be lumbered with any of that kind of stuff, and they know that they're not right, and they know that they're not happy. This is why they're always killing themselves. This is why in their relationships they have massively higher amounts of domestic violence against each other, right? And when this happens, right, they would run a mile. And that's why most gays, the idea of getting married really sickens them, because they know that this is a slippery slope and it's gone too far, and it's going to be the only way homosexuals can just say, I'm homosexual, I'm not a pervert, I'm great, and I want to have children because I'm married. And that's an extra point on the adoption lists. When you want to adopt, you get pushed up to the top. Because of positive discrimination, they're going to be given children more than normal people, you see. Right, so you've got, this is why this thing with Elton John is very important to understand. So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying he's a paedophile, I'm not saying he's even gay, because I don't believe anything that's said about him. It could be true, I'm saying I don't believe it. I'm not saying it's not true, I'm saying it's all a load of bullshit, yeah? It's bullshit. It might be true, it might not, you know? He might be a space alien. I'm not saying he isn't a space alien or he is a space alien. It's completely irrelevant, because the story they're pushing in front of you has got nothing to do with anything to do with reality. It's to trick you. So what's happening behind that story is frankly ridiculous. So anyway, I don't know if they're called Mr. and Mrs. John or whatever. They got some children. Now, and again, that met with mixed receptions from various different groups, including lots of gays, and open gay couples didn't approve of it. Right? Of course, all the loony left ones shout loud to get promoted by the paedophile establishment. So therefore, it appears that everybody thinks it's a good idea, whereas 95% of people don't think it's a good idea outright. And about 5%, the other remaining 10%, 5 of them would really not like it. And then there's about 5% who probably are so stupid they actually think it's a good idea. Now, let's say you've got an uncle and your mum and dad just died and you go and live with your uncle and he's gay. I'm not saying that shouldn't be allowed, but they shouldn't be chosen as a kind of preference. Do you know what I mean? That's absolutely nonsense. It's completely wrong. And there's been numerous cases of like lesbian couples who are normally just, what's the opposite of misogynist? Man-haters, who then torture the little kid to death, or there's a staggering amount of them try and get the kid to have their dicks chopped off and turn them into little girls. They just fucking hate men because probably they've been sexually abused. That's probably the reason. So at the end of the day, yeah, men are to blame probably because they've probably been sexually abused by men. That's probably what's happened to them. And that's why they turned into lezers, because you can't be born a lezer. There's no such thing. It's just a completely fucking mythical concept. Bizarrely enough, the island of Lesbos in Greece, I think that was like the Minotaur Island. You know, it's kind of in the old days it was seen as a completely made up thing. It's like a myth, like fairies or something. I'm not saying fairies or minotaurs or lesbians don't exist, but remember, they're all on a parallel. They don't really exist in real life. It's just a mythical concept. Again, the ancient Greeks got completely perverted, started bumming young boys and thinking that's preferable over doing things with women and healthy things, and then all of a sudden their society completely collapsed. Yeah. And also similarly, in Greek culture, they used to talk about sexual abuse of boys as the way they would pay the teacher. Yeah. Now this is going to come up more importantly at the minute because they replicate things. History repeats itself, not just because of inevitability, but people who know history and have bad inclinations take advantage of it in the same way as people who do not have bad inclinations. Right, so getting back to this story. So anyway, they've got these kids. I have no idea how well they're looking after them, you know, or even if they are looking after them or they're just getting someone else to look after them. The point is then you get this story about David Furnish. This is Elton John's husband, if you like, yeah. He's off in New York or somewhere in America. Elton John lives in England and he's been away for a while, and during his 6 weeks away or whatever it was a long time when you're meant to be looking after children, he got in some kind of tryst with this. Again, this is all a load of bullshit. None of this will have happened, I'm sure, with some other gays, and they had a threesome or something, whatever, doesn't matter. And he was like all olive oil and stuff. All this shit come out in the papers like it was a scandal. It's not a scandal. This is Keith Vaz. This is the same bullshit, yeah? They put this shit out there because they're saying people would have said in the past, right, so those gays, I don't mind them, but they're weird. I don't really think you should look after children. You know, you need a man and a woman to look after the children. And they're possibly perverts. They're much more likely to be perverts. And if you were a pervert, this would be the perfect way to get children. So therefore, we should just say zero tolerance to it, which is what the rule should be, yeah? Okay, with the exception of say somebody's family die and there's no one to look after them apart from their gay uncle or something, then I can see, you know, that would be preferable to putting them into the institutionalised paedophile system, which is the care system, right? So I would in that case it'd be fine. It would be the worst, the lesser of any other evil, I would imagine, and better the devil they know. So they've then proven, because a lot of people would say, well, the second thing is, let's say they're not perverts. Homosexuals are promiscuous, they often live with each other, and this is another argument against gay marriage, is they say, well, the thing is that they just live in the same house and they want the economic advantages to it and they want the convenience of it, like sharing food, sharing chores, sharing bills, all this type of stuff, sharing the things to do with bills like paying the phone bill, paying the gas bill, paying the internet, all that type of stuff. It's easier if there's two people, one person sorts one thing and the other sorts another thing. It's much easier, and some people like doing that stuff more than doing the shopping and stuff like this. All this cleaning, tidying, maintaining the house, all these things, it makes much more sense for people to be in little groups rather than all on their own, because then they have to do everything all on their own. Right, but the thing is that they'll say, well, yeah, but homosexuals are promiscuous and normally they live with each other, but often they don't do anything with each other. They just use that as a kind of way to make everyone else think they're kind of, at least they calm down now and they're stable and they're not just chasing people about fucking Hampstead Heath and doing things to each other in public toilets. Yeah, because people would be much happier to think, right, well, at least we know John's coming round. We know him. We met him loads of times. So, but it would be a lot more inconvenient if they kept thinking, I wonder who we're going to see him popping up with in the high street now. You know, because it's going to be a different person every time. And why are they in the high street? Because they don't go to the high street to buy shopping. They buy that all on the internet. And so they've obviously been down one of those alleys doing some horribleness with each other. Right, so anyway, so the whole point of this story with David Furnish is to say, fuck you, everybody. Right, you idiots have allowed gays to say they're gay. Now you've allowed them to openly go out with each other. Now you've allowed them to get married. Now you've allowed the age of consent for this self-harm to be lowered and rape to be lowered, yeah? Then, like this consensual rape, yeah, as we'll call it, right? Then you've allowed them to get married. Then you've allowed them to have children. Then you've allowed them to have civil partnerships. Then you've allowed them to have children. Then you've allowed them to get married. And now, all of these reasons why they shouldn't be allowed to get married from day one, which you're well aware of, you've just said, look, this David Furnish can't even be bothered to... Like, I'm not saying he's not looking after his children, because for all I know, he didn't even go to America, and the whole thing's completely made up. He might not have even, you know what I mean? He might just see the children whenever they wheel him out for photo opportunities. There's no, do you see what I mean? Because the whole thing will be just a fucking illusion to show you. But they're saying, now we've tricked you idiots all into sort of appearing via the Delphi Technique, yeah? If you look at that up, it's very important. I've actually done videos on the Delphi Technique, DELPHI technique. They've tricked people into thinking, because they haven't approved of it, they've tricked you into thinking that you've pushed this in, but you didn't push it in. They've used the Delphi Technique on you to make you think. They've manufactured your consent when you weren't even consenting to it. But then in the fog of time, or fog of war, which it is because it is a war, and it's a war of subversion, they've managed to get you to think that you've got this thing in and that you've pushed it and it's all a big incidental accident. But it's not. And that's why they had to have him going off and doing something that even someone who might think, oh, gay stuff's sordid. So it had to be a threesome. There had to be some kind of sort of something a bit more kind of kinky involved with it. Because it proves that the guy's promiscuous and he's abandoning his children and he's putting scandals in the paper which would embarrass his children or could potentially embarrass his children. Not that they're his children. They probably bought them off some people in Russia or something like Mark Newton and Peter Trong, the most famous baby rapists in the world, the ones who traffic the little boy around. Anyway, so that's it. I'm trying to explain to you how this works. And thinking about the Keith Vaz story very much explains how these things operate. They have absolutely no respect for you. Now, I don't think Elton John is actually like necessarily a sort of hateful person or anything, but he clearly looks like a completely compromised freak, and he'll do whatever he's told, yeah? So I don't know what they've got on him, or I don't even know if he's got his own mind. I mean, the guy doesn't think, and I'm not saying it's MK Ultra or anything stupid like that. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but there's no need to go delve that deep to explain this, okay? So I appreciate your thoughts, but just please bear this in mind. Language theft. Changing the nature of what the language is, and then throwing down Jewish poison on the floor for you to pick up and then start repeating it, like alt-right, deep state, QAnon, Pizzagate, the Podestas. They're sticking this shit down so you'll pick it up, yeah? And then you'll start going off of it, Hampstead, Hoaxstead, and then you'll start going off on it, and they've then tricked you into using a load of language which is actually a weapon against you. Okay, so my name's Tom Carhill, and it's Friday, the 1st of November, 2019. I'd like to know what you think, and anything that expands upon this, I'd also be grateful to hear. One very good, one of the few different videos you can watch around the Kinsey syndrome, and anything endorsing Judith Reisman, this Jewish woman who was always constantly slagging off the Kinsey Institute after Kinsey died in the 80s and 90s. Very good. She's done some very good things. And it all just explains how all this works. This has got nothing to do with equality. Nobody, frankly, has cared about somebody keeping it down and not promoting their gayness. That's why people didn't like gays. Make no mistake about it. Even in Russia, where they allegedly were going around beating up gays, that movement was called Occupy paedophilia St. Petersburg. All of those people who they were like publicly humiliating and putting on the internet and roughing up and stuff, all of them have been trying to meet underage children. Like, all of them. It was nothing to do with going after gays, trying to meet up with gays, for want of a completely word which you shouldn't really be using. We should be calling them what they are, which is perverts or people with a mental disability. And I don't believe that that's in any way disrespectful, and it's not in any way sign that you hate them. It's just, you know, you don't go around endorsing cancer. It doesn't mean you don't like people who've got cancer, okay? But if you feed the pathology in, and it was described as pathology up until recently, now they're trying to say paedophilia isn't a crime, it's a pathology, by the way, yeah? Yeah? Sorry, and that was the other thing, intersex. The reason they wanted the LGBTI was because intersex was going to be hermaphrodite. Hermaphrodites are not perverts, and hermaphrodite is a word that's been used, and it's an ancient Greek word. So, I believe. And then you've got this intersex was to mean intergenerational, because they didn't want to put, they needed to get that on there, because then all the gays would have a little titter, because intergenerational was their keyword for paedophile, for like their pornography, their pornographic novels and stuff. There was a bookshop, I think it's in America or Canada, maybe, I think it might be in Seattle. And they said, right, we've had complaints about the residents. They don't want your shop to shut down, but we want you to stop putting homoerotica books and pictures, which are all about boys and stuff, as opposed to men. And the man said, well, well, that's I can understand why you do that. Problem is, all of my customers want those books, and so I might as well just close my shop. So I'm going to close my shop, and he closed his shop. Do you see what I mean? Also, as Judith Weisman very, very well said, there's something called like a pink dictionary or something, and she went through this dictionary, and in the pink dictionary, like there was something like a quarter of the words referred to things which were to do with pedestry. That's like, you know, a young man and a boy, or a man and a young man, or a boy, or an adolescent, or sexually abusing minors, yeah? And often, not just minors who are like, just happen to be under the age of consent in the country, but, you know, like people who definitely aren't old enough to be having sex, right? Okay then, so my name's Tom Kyle. It's Friday, the 1st of November 2019, and please watch out for this nonsense. Keith Faz, that whole thing's just fucking distraction news, and again, it's just they're using the same tactics, but they're using them so much now that it becomes sometimes hard to track. And people get so happy when they think the peasants are getting somehow one up on the sort of overlords. Just don't buy the bullshit. You're not going to get, if you get one over them, they're never going to put it on the fucking TV. You fucking retards. All right, bye bye.